right, welcome everyone to today's session, Step by Step, Deploy Your First SDDC. My name is DeMarcus Mack, and I'm along with me is Pablo Cruces. Pablo and myself are VMC Customer Success Architects, focusing on the VMC on AWS solution.
Hi, morning everyone. It's Pablo Cruces, a Customer Success Architect based in Spain, helping customers through along EMEA and helping today on DeMarcus on this beautiful session. Hope you enjoy.
Thank you, Pablo. And also, yeah, I'm based out of Dallas, Texas, right? So I work on the Americas team. So jumping into the agenda, today we're going to talk about the prerequisites of what do you need to have in place before you can deploy your first SDDC. Then we're going to just jump into an SDDC architecture overview, sort of a logical diagram to show you what we're going to be building today. And then we'll jump right into the demo. And at the end of the session, I'm going to show you how you can get support. At this point, let's bring up the poll question. So we have a poll that we want to ask the audience to fill out. We'll give you a couple of 30 to 40 seconds to fill out the poll really quick, and we'll bring up the results. All right, so yeah, it's overwhelming. So we have 71% of people say that they do have public cloud and hybrid cloud initiatives within the next year. So that's really good. And then the other question, which case do you envision using VMware Cloud on AWS? 50% of people said, production workloads, and the other 50% said disaster recovery. So those are great use cases for VMC on AWS. Thank you for participating. All right, so jumping into the prerequisites here, right? The first thing you're going to need before you can deploy an SDDC is a VMware account. If you've already, worked with VMware products on premises, chances are you already have a VMware account. If not, it's pretty simple enough to go out to the VMware website and create a My VMware account.
Yeah, DeMarcus, sorry, can you share the slides, please?
Okay, I'm not sharing. Sorry.
No, you're not sorry.
All right, let me see what's happening here. Okay, here we go. All right, let me get the presentation up and then we'll be. All right, so can you see the slides now? Okay, cool. Sorry about that, everyone. I was going back, I was talking about your VMware account. So you need to have a VMware account before you can deploy an SDDC. Most people that's already have worked with VMware products and solutions already have a VMware account. But if you don't, it's simple enough to just go out to the My VMware portal and create the account. Once you get that account created and you worked with your sales teams, or you went out to the VMware website and basically fill out a form to purchase a VMC on AWS, you will receive an activation email with a link in it that will allow you to, you click on that link and it'll basically allow you to activate your VMware VMC on cloud activation. The next thing you're going to need is an AWS account, right? So as part of the service to deploy an SDDC, you have to have an AWS account. And this account the account that you use has to have permissions, the appropriate permissions to be able to execute a cloud formation template that basically serves as a resource that will link the the new SDDC to the customer-owned AWS account. So that account has to have the correct permissions. Part of the planning that you have to do prior to deploying an SDDC is, determining which AWS region that you're going to be in, picking out an AZ, which is an availability zone. And then if you notice here, I have dedicated VPC. So guidance from us from VMware is that we prefer that you have a dedicated VPC for your first SDDC, but it's not you don't have to have one, right? You could use an existing VPC, but you will have to have a dedicated subnet. Now we recommend a /26 as the minimum subnet size because we need to be able to have at least 17 ENIs. If you take a look, if you notice in VMC, the maximum cluster size is 16 hosts. A /26 will allow you to have at least 17 ENIs. That's 17 ENIs for maintenance, and also the rest of the IPs in that subnet are used for internal purposes. And then the next thing you have to have is a SDDC management CIDR, right, for the SDD itself. The management CIDR is not the same as the VPC subnet CIDR, right? These are two different CIDRs. So I'll just pause there and ask if there's any questions. Okay, no questions, so we'll move on. So this is the SDDC architecture, right? So if you focus at the graphic on the right side of the screen called customer AWS account, this is the customer, this is the account that you as the customer owns, right? So in this account, you will be able to create your own, EC2 instances, your own S3 buckets, and other services in AWS. But what we're going to focus on today is this little green box here, right? This is called a VPC. If you're unfamiliar with this term, it is a virtual private cloud, right? And within the virtual private cloud, you can actually create subnets, right? You need subnets as a part of the VPC so that we can basically deploy these ENIs in, right, when we get ready to launch the SDDC deployment. Right here in this bottom right-hand portion of the screen is just sort of a graphic of what the cloud formation template looks like. It has data in here that it has all of the data that's needed to actually link these two VPCs together. Excuse me, these two accounts together, right? So on the left-hand side of the screen, this is also an AWS account, but this account is managed by VMware, right? So this is managed by the VMC solution. And within this AWS account here, right, if you look at this blue box here, this is where we would, this is actually the SDDC. And within that SDDC, we have these physical, these I3 EN or I3 medical physical hosts, I3 medical, excuse me, metal hosts that you can deploy and that will be deployed to your SDDC. And then you have the other constructs like the vCenter, the NSXT, and vSAN. So any questions on the SDDC architecture? Okay, moving on.
No question right now. So.
Okay, thank you, Pablo. So the demo is going to be broken up into slides, live demo, and then also a pre-recorded video. So here in these slides here, I'm just sort of showing where how you log into your AWS console, you search for VPC, and then you select the VPC's link, and then you can go and create a VPC. The second slide here is how you create your subnets, right? So once you're in the VPC screen, you select the subnets, create subnet, and then enter the properties of the subnet. So we're going to jump from here and go directly into the live demo. All right, so here I'm already logged into the AWS console, and if this is not, if you haven't searched for anything here, you can just basically type in VPC up here. Click on the VPC icon, and then you get this list of all the different AWS services that you have. So here we're going to focus on VPC, and I'll just go through the wizard here to create one. So we'll call this demo SDDC VPC 01. And say, give it a CIDR block, let's say 10.16.0.0/16. Okay, and that's pretty much it. Now, I gave it a tag here, right? So it shows up down here. I can't click the create VPC button here because in my AWS account we've already reached our limit of 5 VPCs. So I'm going to click cancel here. So, but we do have this VPC that's already created here with a 10.10.0.0/16. And so what I'll do here is click on subnets, and I'll go ahead and create a subnet. So as you recall, as I talked about in the prerequisites, you have to have a subnet created in that VPC for the SDDC to use. So we'll just go here. We'll click on. We know which VPC we need, the 10.10.0.0/16, and then we'll just go ahead and create a subnet here, right? So I'll call it, demo subnet SDDC 01. Just whatever, it's better if you tag your subnets with a unique name so that you can be able to identify it later on. Here is the availability zone that this subnet is going to be created in. You can leave this option here for no preference, but AWS is going to choose which AZ that it goes in. So if you're a stickler for documentation and standardization, I would say go ahead and choose which availability zone that you want that subnet to be created in. So I'm going to use this US W2 AZ1 here. And at this point, I can click create subnet, and I will, and we're, oh, sorry. I got to put a subnet IP4 CIDR block in. So I'm going to use 10.10.92.0/24. Now this is this is the CIDR block that I said that you can use a /26 at a minimum. I'm going to use a /24 just to give more, room for growth. So I'll click create subnet. Now you see that subnet has been created. And this one subnet is sufficient enough for us to move on and deploy the SDDC using this single subnet. But I'm going to create another subnet for the purposes of if I needed to, deploy a stretch cluster or a multi-AZ deployment, you're going to need for multi-AZ or stretch clusters, you're going to need 2 subnets. So let's just create another one here. So I'll just call this one SDDC, subnet 2. And I will say that this is going to be in AZ2. And then I'll give another CIDR range here. Let's try 93. That one. Okay, so refresh here. All right, so these are the 2 subnets that I just created here, SDDC US AZ1 and US AZ2, or SDDC subnet 02 and SDDC subnet 01. Okay, the next thing to take a look at is the route table, right? So if you take a look at the route table for that SDDC, this one right here, we need to look at the subnet associations and make sure that the 2 subnets that I created are in this route table. So here's the 93.0 and here's the 92.0 route tables that I created. Once we deploy the SDDC, the main route table here is what's going to exchange routes between the SDDC and the AWS connected VPC. So any questions on the AWS VPC or subnet creation? Okay. So I will jump back to the PowerPoint deck here and move over to the next slide. So this is now that we've completed the AWS prerequisites, right? We move over to deploying the first SDDC. If this is your very first SDDC, once you connect to vmc.vmware.com and you log in, you're gonna get this screen right here. Welcome to VMware Cloud on AWS, and then you'll get this button here to create your first SDDC. I can't demo this screen because in our org we've already created multiple SDDCs, but I wanted to put this on the presentation so that you'll see what this might look like in your scenario. So I'm going to go ahead and log in here with my VMware account that I mentioned that you would need as a prerequisite. Okay, so I'm in the VMC console now. I'm going to jump back over to the presentation and sort of kind of walk through the screens that we're going to see. So once you click that button that says "Create My SDDC," you're going to come up with this wizard, right? And what you're going to do is you're going to click on AWS. In your environment, you're not going to see the zero cloud option, so it's going to default to AWS. And then you're going to drop down to whichever region you want. You're going to select multi-host, select the host type, name the SDDC, the number of hosts, and then you're going to hit next. If this is your very first time connecting to an AWS account, you're going to have to click this blue box here that says Open AWS Console with Cloud Formation Template. And this is where I was saying that AWS account you have has to have the appropriate permissions to be able to execute this Cloud Formation script, because this is the template, the script that links the two accounts together. Okay, so once the AWS account linking is completed, you come in here and you choose the VPC that you created, and then you would choose the subnet that you created. In this instance, I chose one subnet here, right? So 10.10.90.0/24. I will call out that this is a pretty good graphic right here to take a look at, because this shows you, how that account linking is going to work and how you can get, communication between VMC VMs to communicate with AWS instances in your customer-owned AWS account. There's going to be an ENI connection here that's a 25 gigabit per second connection that will allow that communication between the two accounts. So the next screen here is you go in here, you enter your management CIDR. Now, I will point out here that you're going to have to do some planning here, right? Because once you choose this management CIDR, if you need to, let's say you choose a 23 and you realize that CIDR is not large enough, and you need to create a larger CIDR, you can't just recreate the CIDR. You have to destroy the entire SDDC and then redeploy it with the new subnet or the new CIDR here. So I would say, it takes this is one step that you have to do some careful planning. You hit next. At this screen here, you just accept the charges, and then you would click on Deploy SDDC. So I can't deploy the SDDC today because it takes about 2 hours to deploy it. So I've already deployed it, and I'm just going to kind of go back to the VMC console and sort of walk through the same section here, because there's some other things I want to point out. So here in the SDDC console, if I click Create SDDC, as I was mentioning here, in my org, it defaults to zero cloud. You won't see this as a customer. You'll see just the AWS button here. I'm going to select the US West Oregon. And I want to talk about the single host option first, right? So this is you can deploy a single host for PLC purposes. So let's put a name here. And let's go next. So the reason I want to point this out here is because, as I was stating earlier, one of the prerequisites for VMC SDDC is to be able to connect to an AWS account. If you're deploying a one node host for POC, you can skip the section for connecting to an AWS account, and you can run that host for 30 days and test it out. If you decide to keep the host, you will have to eventually connect to an AWS account, and then you will eventually have to scale up to 3 hosts or a minimum of 2 hosts in the cluster. So I'm going to go back here and start over. So in my example here, I want to use multi-host. I want to use i3 host type. I'm going to use the same name. And here I get to select how many hosts I want to deploy. So you can, in the UI, you can deploy up to 4 hosts for your, when you first deploy the SDDC. If you needed to, if for example, you size your SDDC to be 6 hosts, you would have to deploy the first 4 hosts first. And then once those 4 hosts are, once the SDDC is running, you come back and add additional hosts, and I'll show you how to do that. I also want to point out this advanced configuration section, right? So this option here allows you to determine the size of your SDDC, right? So you can have a medium SDDC, which is a medium size vCenter, also a medium size NSX edges. But if you know that your SDDC is going to require more performance, you can go ahead and choose a large. And this is basically, the larges are double the size of the medium appliances. So I'll leave that as medium for now. Here is, I've already connected to an AWS account, but this is where I was showing that if you never connected to your AWS account, you would basically click this button here and your AWS console would open up, and then you have the option to go in and execute the CloudFormation script. But because I've already connected to an AWS account, I'm just going to select it here. Now, this is the VPC that we created over in the AWS console. This is where you would see it populating here. And then you would be able to choose those subnets that we created, right? So I created 10.10.93.0, and I also created 10.10.92.0/24. So I'm just going to select this one. In a single AZ deployment, this is all you need, but if you were deploying a stretch cluster deployment, you'd have to come in here and you'd have to select that second. Actually, let's see, did I miss it? Okay, so somehow I missed something here, but you'd have to come in here and select that second subnet. So I'm going to click next here, because I just want to deploy a single AZ. And then here, this is where you would put your management CIDR in, and just a reminder, right? This CIDR cannot be changed without destroying the SDDC. So I'm going to put 172.30.0.0/ we'll use a /23 here. Then I hit next, and then I would basically hit, accept these charges here and deploy the SDDC. So once you hit the deploy the SDDC button, it takes about 2 hours to deploy the SDDC. So I went ahead and pre-deployed one, and I'm just going to pull up a video and show you what the entire process looks like. So here I'm just going through and we're going through the wizard again. So here I'm just selecting the VPC that I created. And then I'm entering the management subnet. The management subnet, this is where the ESXi host, the vCenter, NSX edges, they get their IP addresses from that management subnet that you enter. So you see here, it gives an estimated time of 119 minutes. So it takes about 2 to 2.5 hours. I sort of sped up the video here a little bit, but it goes through and it does a number of phases to deploy an SDDC. Has any questions came in regarding the deployment of the SDDC? So no questions. Okay, so just a couple more seconds here, and then we'll see you'll get a banner here that says your SDDC has been deployed, and then you'll actually see the SDDC, and you'll see the CPU and memory and storage utilization.
There's one question, Marcus. Someone is asking about if they can create for free.
Create for free?
Yeah.
No. As I was, let me pull up the console here. All right, so we have a one node option that you can demo and run in a POC environment, but it's not for free. You have to basically log into the VMware website and make a purchase, and you have to put up a credit card information. And I believe there's a $2,000 hold on that credit card. Right? So there's no option to deploy the SDDC for free. Okay, so this is just a slide of the. Okay, any questions before? There's a couple of things I want to show before we move on. Okay, so no more questions. Now I want to show. So here's the SDDC that I pre-deployed, and there's a number of tabs here that you can click on for configuration purposes. But I want to show you this tab here, right? Support. So anytime during your SDDC deployment or post deployment, you have any issues configuring SDDC, it's pretty simple to get support, right? You just click on this little tab here, and then you can search for some popular answers that may give you the answer that you need, or you can just chat here directly with members of the BMC on AWS support team. If they ask you you're probably going to get asked information like what version of the SDDC you're running, and you can pretty much see it here under the support tab, right? So you see here that I'm running a SDDC version 1.14, right? And then you also get information here about your org ID and your SDDC ID, and then information here regarding your vCenter public IP, private, and NSX manager IP. I will say one thing here is that once this SDDC is deployed, it's accessible. You can access it over the public internet. So you can access vCenter directly over the public internet, right? And just so you can have access to it. Most customers, what they're going to do is they're going to, come in, well, all customers are going to come in and establish their connectivity, right? So they're going to either, establish a VPN connection. And I won't go over the configuration here, but you have the option for route-based VPN and policy-based VPN, or you have an option for just configuring a direct connection directly to your SDDC. Once either of these are in place, you can actually come back over here to the settings tab here, and then you can change the vCenter fully qualified domain to start resolving on a private IP. So today, once the SDDC is deployed, it automatically starts resolving on the public IP. But once you get your connectivity in place, like your VPN or your direct connect, you just basically hit this button here and you drop down and resolve on your private IP address.
We have two questions regarding connectivity. First one is if we can add this VMC and AWS vCenter to the on-premise vCenter. Is it possible, Marcus?
Yes, it's possible if you want to be able to manage both of your vCenters in a single pane of glass. I think that's the question. It is possible, right? We have two options for doing that, right? So we have you could just come in and log into your vCenter and set up an identity source, or you can download what we have. I think it's somewhere here. Tools. So on the tools button here, you can download this vCenter Cloud Gateway appliance, install it on premises, and then you can add your basically add your SDDC vCenter and your on-premises vCenter, and then you can manage both vCenters with the vCenter Cloud Gateway. Was that the question, Pablo?
Yeah, I think so, because the second one was about if there is any other method to use instead the linked mode capability to control both vCenters. So I think this will answer both. And also in next sessions, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, so link mode, are we talking about, the cloud vCenter and the on-premises vCenter? If we're talking about the cloud vCenter and the on-premises vCenter, right? Link mode is the way to manage both vCenters, right?
Yeah, right. It answered the question.
Okay. Any other questions? One thing there's one other thing that I want to point out, right? So I said a couple of times here in the demo that if you deploy your SDDC with a certain size CIDR, and you decide later that CIDR is too small and you need to increase it, you'd have to destroy the SDDC and create another one. On the other hand, if you create a subnet and determine that and find out later on that subnet is too small, there is a process that we have that you can resize your subnet, right? You just basically have to open up a case with VMware, and we can resize the subnet. And that way you don't have to redeploy the SDDC.
So regarding this, there is one more question, and is it possible to deploy an SDDC without connecting this to an AWS account?
Yeah, there is a way to deploy the SDDC without connecting to an AWS account, and that's a temporary measure, though. That's a temporary deployment. So here in the deployment screen here, if you select single host and let's give it a name, this will allow you to skip this section right here for connecting to an AWS account, right? So you can actually go next here, and then you can complete the wizard, put your management CIDR in, hit next, and then accept the charges and deploy. Now you have a single node SDDC that's not connected to an AWS account. However, after 30 days, that single node SDDC is going to either have to be destroyed or it's going to have to be scaled up to a production-ready SDDC, which is a minimum of 2 hosts, and you're going to have to connect it to an AWS account.
Yeah, and also adding this one is, can an existing VPC be used for this task or not?
I used an existing VPC for this task, but I used dedicated subnets, right? So our guidance here is if you can, use a dedicated VPC, right? But if you can't and you have to use an existing VPC, then at a minimum you have to have you should be using dedicated subnets, right, within that VPC. So hopefully that VPC has a large enough CIDR block, right, to accommodate additional subnets for VMC.
Okay, hope this answers the question. I think so.
Okay, that pretty much concludes the demo. I mean, as you can see here, it's pretty straightforward. I would say that when you're going through your planning and getting your prerequisites ironed out, the AWS side is probably going to be handled by somebody else in your team, maybe your network team, right? So they would already have the VPC and the subnets created, right? And I just went through the demo to show you, what it looks like if you had to create those yourself. But if those prerequisites are already in place, then it's just as simple as logging into the VMC console, click create SDDC and then run it through the wizard, right? And then 2 hours later, you have a functional, SDDC. So I think that's it. I think there's some maybe some other poll questions that we were going to.
We have one more question.
Okay.
We can go first of the pool. Is can the SDDC management CIDR be changed after the SDDC has been deployed?
No, it cannot. It cannot. The only way to change the SDDC management CIDR is to delete the SDDC and then recreate a new one with the appropriate CIDR. So this is where planning. Let's just take a look at this real quick since we're here.
It's really important. Thanks for remarking this. Because, yeah.
I'm just selecting something here just for demo purposes. So if you look at this, the verbiage here, right, it gives you the minimum CIDR sizes, and it tells you, if you choose a /23, you have up to 27 hosts, /20 up to 251 hosts, and then a /16 up to 4,091 hosts, right? So if for example, in the beginning of your planning, right, you say I'm not going to need more than 27 hosts, right, and you select the /23. And then 6 months later, you encounter some type of organic growth, right? That you're going to need, double the amount of hosts that you have here, 27. Then the only way to have a larger SDDC is to actually delete the SDDC, right? You can't come in here and resize the CIDR while the SDDC is in place. You'd have to delete it and create a new one from scratch. And so, that's why it takes careful planning when you're planning out, how large you want your SDDC to be. And that's from the management CIDR side and also the VPC subnet side as well, right? So you want to take consideration into how large you think you're going to scale up your SDDC and then size those CIDRs appropriately, right? Because it's very difficult after the SDDC is running to come back and resize. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I think so. So in your experience, is a good investment to spend time thinking in what you are doing now in the next steps or planning this carefully on networking, especially.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say even if you're doing a POC, right? I mean, sometimes POCs turn into full production environments, right? So if you spin up that one node SDDC just to test the functionality, and you like it, and you want to scale up to additional nodes, keep that in mind that you might want to, make sure that your CIDR blocks are large enough.
Fully agree on that.
Yep. And that's it. It's as simple as 1, 2, 3. It doesn't take, VMware took a lot of effort out of deploying an SDDC, right? This thing is fully automated, right? You go through, you click a few buttons, right, and then there's a bunch of automated tasks in the background, right, that does all this configuration for you. And 2 hours later, you have an SDDC that you can actually start, making configurations in. For example, you can start configuring your network connectivity, configuring your firewall rules. If you're going to use direct connect, you can have it configured. DNS you can configure in here, and then you can start moving workloads over or deploying new workloads. We have a solution called HCX. I'll just mention it. We have a solution called HCX here that allow you to migrate workloads from on-premises to the cloud. And I'm just mentioning that here for sakes, right? But you can also just deploy, launch vCenter and then deploy SDDCs. Deploy VMs from scratch, right? So I think we can open the vCenter here. Let's see. and maybe not, because this is where, I don't want to go into the configuration of the SDDC, but this is where you would have to come in and, you would have to create some, some firewall rules. Yeah, you'd have to come in and create some firewall rules here for the management gateway, right? So I could cover this, but this is going to be covered in another office hours. So I'm not going to cover some of these more configuration items here. Any more questions, Pablo?
I think we can go with the pools, and then maybe there are 2 or 3 questions, but
yeah, okay.
if you can answer this pool attendance, we will be so much appreciated.
Yeah, but you can. So there's a poll on the screen if you want to kind of rate the just kind of fill out the poll question here.
So while people is finishing the pool, is there one question that you mentioned before about the maximum number of hosts on the pool? What happened when you raise that maximum number of hosts on an SDDC, the 16 number, and there's a trigger or something that makes it grow? Or
yeah, so that's a trick question, right? It really all depends, right? So how large your CIDR block is, right? So the maximum cluster size is 16 hosts, right? But for example, right, when we're doing maintenance, right, we add another host, right? So that makes 17, right? So if we're doing some type of maintenance, we have to add a host, and that makes your cluster size 17 as we evacuate the host, or if there's a host in the cluster that has a problem and there's a predicted failure, right? We can add another host in the cluster to remediate that, basically evacuate the other, add a new host, evacuate the other one, right? And the other part of it is, it's a service, right? And we want to maintain a certain level of performance in your SDDC, right? So if you're at a maximum of 16 hosts, right, and something happens, right, where you're maxing out CPU and memory, right, and we need to add 2 or 3 more hosts to the cluster, we can do that. That'll be, you'll have 18 hosts in the cluster at that point. You'd have to remediate the issues and then get the cluster back down to the appropriate size, or create a second cluster in the SDDC. So the short answer is, it's a service from VMC, right? And we're going to make sure that your SDDC is performing at its peak level, right? And if we have to add more than 16 hosts, assuming you have enough IP address space for it, we do that.
Yeah, and what's about the scale down the clusters? Which are the options, or is it possible or not when we create one of 3 hosts, or when we have one of 10 hosts? So which is the best practice, or the recommendations on that? Or
yeah, so in your SDDC, let's say you deploy a 3-node, SDDC, or 1 node, or let's say a 3-node here. You have the option to come in, if you're looking at your utilization here, right, and you're 70%, let's say you're 90% CPU utilization, 80% memory, right? You can come in here and add hosts, right? Or if you just have, or you're going to be growing, right? You basically just come in here and add hosts to the cluster. You can add up to, looks like you can add up to 6 hosts here, and then you click add hosts, and it's going to grow your cluster, right? It's going to grow your cluster. It's going to take a couple of hours to do it. If you have more hosts than you actually need, you can also come in here and remove hosts from the cluster, right? So if you had 10 hosts and you only needed 6, you can actually come in here and you can start removing hosts. I can't do it here because I have the minimum number of hosts in the cluster. And that's a good point. The minimum number of hosts in the cluster is depending on your deployment, but two nodes, right, is the absolute minimum for a production cluster. You can also come in here and add clusters. So if I wanted to just add a new cluster, I could click on add cluster and go through the wizard and do so. One thing here is if you deployed your SDDC with the i3 host type, and then later on down the line you wanted to have i3 ENs, you can't have them in the same cluster as your i3s, but you can create a separate cluster and then add the i3 EN host type to that cluster. You can also rename the SDDC. So if I want to just rename this to demo 01, I can do that, no problem. Okay, so that's any more questions?
No, I think we don't have more questions right now. Let me check it. No, people were asking also about if we will share the recording and also the slides, and I just was answering on the chat that it will be probably added on the thank you email, and also the slides will be shared after this. So
absolutely. So yes, the recording and the slides will be made available. Okay, so if we don't have any other questions, I'm going to move on in the slide here. This slide here just has some additional resources that you can read up on. We have the VMware Cloud Tech Zone, the VMware Cloud Customer Success Community, and the VMware Cloud on AWS homepage. Each of these resources has plenty of information, very good information about VMC on AWS. It talks about the prerequisites of how you deploy your SDDC, and talks about some of the other use cases that you can use the SDDC for. And again, yeah, go ahead, Pablo.
Sorry, there's one last question.
Yep.
And if there's any link where we can understand on settings that can be modified versus which cannot be modified regarding the VMC and AWS components.
Yeah, I think so. You want to start here with these three URLs here, right? And then also the VMware Cloud on AWS documentation page, right? It gives you information on how to administer the SDDC, and things that you can rename. Like I renamed the name, and also go to the configuration maximums page. VMware for the VMC SDDC. That page, the config max page, gives you details on what are the limitations and what are the maximums for the configuration items in VMC.
Thank you. Great.
Again, thank you for joining. My name is DeMarcus Mack. Thank you, Pablo, for assisting today. We are, like I said, we are the customer success. We are two of a large team of customer success architects around the globe.
Yeah, thank you. Great session. And thank you all the people and all the questions. I think it was great, and you did a really nice session, and I think you answered all the questions gratefully. So great.
Excellent. Thank you very much.